online, on the TuneIn app,
and on your smart speaker.
Play Shock Radio.
This is the sound of Salford.
Shock Radio News.
Good evening, I'm Oliver Sykes. This is the Shock Radio News Show. It's just gone 7 o'clock. And firstly, we will take a look at this evening's main headlines. Emergency services are in attendance at a serious collision in Kendal. Police were contacted at 4:58 p.m. today with a report of a collision involving a car and two children on a pitch at Kendal Rugby Union Football Club on Shap Road. Police can confirm that one of the children involved has sadly died. The second child involved in this serious collision is being treated by paramedics. Immediate family members of both respective children have been informed. The driver of the car, a man aged in his 40s, has been arrested on suspicion of causing death by dangerous driving. And police want to hear from anyone who thinks they've been targeted by a Chinese PhD student who could turn out to be one of the country's most prolific sexual attackers. The 28-year-old met women online, invited them to his before drugging them and filming himself carrying out the offences in London and in China. And the US president's ordered a stop to intelligence sharing between America and Ukraine. Meanwhile, French officials say Sir Keir Starmer, Volodymyr Zelensky and Emmanuel Macron could be going back to Washington to show Donald Trump the work being done by London and Paris on a peace plan. The UK's competition watchdog has dropped its review of Microsoft's partnership with OpenAI. The CMA says it's satisfied the deal doesn't need closer scrutiny under merger rules. The Prince of Wales has suggested NHS staff could have enforced career breaks to help their mental health. William's been at a hospital in Reading hearing how health workers coped with the COVID-19 pandemic. And in sport, Liverpool are in action in the last 16 of the Champions League later. They finished top of their group in the last phase and are in Paris to face PSG this evening. It's 4 minutes past 7. You're listening to the Shock Radio News Show, presented by myself, Oliver Sykes, and the guests this evening joining me in the studio are Alfie Mulcahy and Benny Fiddimore. Good evening, gentlemen. Sorry, I'll turn on the microphones. That would be helpful. How are we doing this evening?
Yes, good, thank you. You all right?
So we'll start this evening's programme by our main topic, which is Ukraine. Firstly, shall we listen to the clash between Trump and Zelensky from last week? But before I want to touch on that, earlier today the US stopped sharing intelligence with Kyiv that's been aiding Ukraine in the war with Russia. Previously, the source with knowledge of the situation said the halt in the flow of intelligence has been selective, only affecting information that could have been used for attacks inside Russia. Thoughts on this then?
So this is a big change again. I mean, it seems to be we come on air on a Wednesday and something new has happened each week. So a couple of weeks ago we had the whole thing about Trump accusing Zelensky of being a dictator. Then last week we were in a position where we could say, oh, maybe it's all going to be okay. There's this minerals deal on the table. Then what we're going to hear is the clash, which we had on Friday, between Zelensky and Trump. And now we're seeing this whole intelligence being stopped. So this is going to really damage the Ukrainian effort in their war against Russia.
Alfie?
Well, absolutely. We've seen since Donald Trump's taken power that he's been less willing to work with the Ukrainian people and has been acting in a very dominant way, commanding power over Ukraine and trying to command power over Europe as well.
Yeah, so this is an added blow for Kyiv as President Donald Trump has decided to pause all military aid. Trump wasn't happy with the meeting on Friday at the White House, and they had this clash. Should we have a listen to it now?
Everybody has problems, even you, but you have nice ocean and don't feel now, but you will feel it in the future. God bless.
You don't know that.
God bless.
You don't
God
know
bless.
that.
You will not have a war.
Don't tell us what we're going to feel.
War,
You're not
Mr.
in a good
Brown,
position. You don't have the cards right now. With us, you start having
I'm not
cards.
playing cards.
But right now, you
I'm
don't.
very
Yeah, you're playing
serious,
cards.
Mr. President.
You're
I'm
playing
very
cards.
serious.
You're
I'm
gambling
the
with the
president
lives
in
of
war.
millions of people.
You think-
You're gambling with World War III.
Have you said thank you once this
A lot
entire
of
meeting?
time.
So what was your reaction? Obviously, Friday evening we were busy with charity campsite, but I remember speaking to you both on the matter there and then. What was your thoughts on that? Because that was a really big news story for Friday evening.
It sounds almost like a playground argument between school kids. You've got shouting over the top of each other. You've got J.D. Vance, who wasn't sat with Zelensky and Trump. He was sort of sat a little bit away in the corner of the room, but yelling in off mic to try and give his opinion as well. It's all really unprofessional. We're used to seeing these diplomatic efforts take place in the White House, in that room in front of the fireplace, with two world leaders having a toned down discussion in front of the media on pre-discussed points. But what we saw here was both of them and Vance going off script and creating more headlines, which some people have said was Trump's intention.
Well, that's what I was going to say. There is the allegations that it was all a setup to trap Zelensky. I mean, first of all, you've got him on his own, and then you've got Trump and Vance in the Oval Office against him, essentially. And then also Trump making that comment at the end of the meeting saying this is going to make great television. It kind of, like Alfie says, school kids, I would say, no matter what you think of either side, it looked like a clown show to the rest of the world watching what unfolded in the Oval Office on Friday afternoon. And it's extraordinary. I don't think we've ever seen anything like this before.
No, I certainly haven't. And 1 second, whilst I've just been logged out, but there we are. It's interesting because everyone's been watching. It really did make a lot of people engage with what's been going on, and there's been some improvement. I believe in a speech on Tuesday, the US president said he appreciated a letter from his Ukrainian counterpart saying Kyiv was ready to sign a minerals agreement with Washington at any time. So I think that's definitely an improvement from what occurred on Friday, would you say, or would you sort of disagree with that?
I don't know whether it's potentially an improvement. I think what you've now got is that Zelensky's entered that room, the Oval Office, been completely talked down to by Trump and Vance, and kind of been told, we're the US, you're just a small country in Europe. And he's probably feeling quite intimidated, and he's got to take what he can get, because after that, there's the fear Ukraine are going to lose more and more support from the US. So I think he's probably in a position where he's got to do whatever he can to keep them on side so he can carry on protecting his people.
Well, this minerals guarantee, and we discussed it last week, was meant to be a security guarantee from the US that they would protect Ukraine if they got a share of the minerals, were able to mine in Ukraine. But instead, what we've seen is this deal has got to the latter stages of being signed, but now we've seen the US roll back on pretty much all types of aid it's sending into the country.
Should we have a listen to what Mr. President Trump... So a US-Ukraine meeting will take place in the near future, and Volodymyr Zelensky's top aide has said a British man... a British man accused by Russia of fighting for... Oh, I've hit my microphone off. I do apologise. I don't know how that's happened. Sorry. Let me go back to where I was. A US-Ukraine meeting will take place in the near future. Volodymyr Zelensky's top aide has said a British man is accused by Russia of fighting for Ukraine has been jailed for 19 years by a military court. So, yes, there's a lot going on at the moment, and it's changing all the time. Is there anything else you want to touch on this topic?
Well, it's clear that Russia are still fighting. If they're putting people in prison who have been fighting for Ukraine, then it's definitely clear that whilst we have all this from Trump saying how Putin is ready to sit down and talk and end the war, well, it's only going to happen if Ukraine kind of agree to his terms. Russia aren't just going to switch off.
Alfie?
Yeah, and we've seen over the last week or so how kind of tense the whole situation is. We've got President Macron. He's making an address at the minute on this situation. It's progressed much further in the last couple of weeks than it has potentially in the last 12 months. Whether it's progressed in the right direction for Ukraine or perhaps in the right direction for Russia, yet to be seen.
Well, on top of this, a US military court ruled that Mr. Anderson, a 22-year-old James Scott Reese Anderson, was reportedly captured in Russia's Kursk region last November, where Ukrainian forces had launched a cross-border incursion charged with terrorism and mercenary activity. A Russian military court ruled that Mr. Anderson would spend the first 5 years of his sentence in prison before being transferred to a penal colony with strict conditions. That's interesting, isn't it?
It definitely is, yeah. And I think Russia still, this week also marks 7 years since the Salisbury poisonings as well. And it's clear that the diplomatic relationships with Russia across the West are still clearly strained if they're going to be putting people from Britain in prison, despite perhaps us seeing a perhaps warmer approach to Russia from the Trump administration.
Yes, well, the US relationship in the world is often quite a powerful one, and they've been providing this intelligence with Russia since the invasion in 2022, significant intelligence. So it's going to be interesting to see how this all ends up playing out, isn't it?
Yeah, and what difference it makes to the war effort.
Well, is there anything else that either you want to touch on? Any comments?
Well, we saw in the House today that all political parties were very much on happier terms. There was not really much shouting today, whereas in the last few weeks it's been really quite policy focused, especially from Kemi Badenoch towards Keir Starmer. But today we saw both sides of the House really working quite constructively on issues around Ukraine and the US. And Keir Starmer was calling for a united front. He said that several times today, calling for a united front. So did Mike Tapp, the MP for Dover and Deal. He said that it was so good to see the House united over this issue.
And just one last thing, I think on that point, it just shows the severity of the situation.
Yeah, you're listening to the Shock Radio News Show, and we're going to listen now to what Sir Keir Starmer had to say earlier today at Prime Minister's Questions.
We need to ensure that the US, the UK, Europe and Ukraine are working together, but we must not choose between the US and Europe. We never have historically, and we're not going to do so now.
15 minutes past 7, you're listening to the Shock Radio News Show with Alfie Mulcahy and Benny Fiddimore and myself, Oliver Sykes. So that was Keir Starmer there calling for a united front in the conflict against Russia. Well, we're going to move on now to Trump. We've obviously spoken quite a bit at length about him already and in regards to Russia, but his Congress speech today, and Trump has been very critical of Joe Biden, the previous president, and about inflation, claiming that inflation was out of control. We've been listening to the press meeting from the White House just before, and the press secretary was discussing how the agricultural secretary is focusing on egg prices. Now, egg prices are higher than anywhere else in the world. I did not know that before today.
Well, I've seen it on social media over the last few weeks. Loads of people have been posting pictures of shelves in America with the price tag on eggs, and in some places you can get a pack of 6 for about 12 quid, which is nuts. And we heard in that press conference today something I quite liked. Make America affordable again is something that we heard from the White House press secretary. It's clearly something that they're wanting to focus on, but the tariffs aren't working in the way they should, or in the way that Trump is claiming they should, in order to bring the prices down. I
think his decision to completely slam the economy under Joe Biden kind of it acts as a preview to what we're about to see. We're going to probably see a lot of tariffs. Like we already know that that's coming. I think this is kind of like the preview to the tariffs that are about to come, but also perhaps other cuts to other parts of the US budget. Obviously, we've got Elon Musk and his Department for Government Efficiency. So yeah, I think it's definitely Trump saying, right, the economy is awful, but that's why I'm here now. I'm going to save the economy, and it kind of adds into his whole, you say, make America affordable again, sort of, his mantra to say, yeah.
And the other thing on government efficiency, they've said that loads of money has been stashed away by the Biden administration going to stuff that needs to be hundreds of millions of dollars spent fraudulently is what they're claiming. But despite saying we're wanting to make government more open, we've got access to all the files, we're going to be showing you all this corruption, no evidence has been provided yet.
And that's quite symbolic, I think, of what this administration is doing right now. It's kind of setting the scene for what's about to come. So it's saying what was terrible before, and it's the same with the illegal immigrants. So they claim that 21 million people entered the US illegally during the Biden administration, and now they're saying that and this has actually been verified, that crossings were the lowest for a month in February just gone. So I think that shows that we're going to undo the work that was done by the previous administration. I think that's why he's decided to focus on this so much in the Congress speech.
And in regards to US-Mexico border crossings, the lowest since records began in 2000. This is true, but Border Control reported 8,326 encounters of migrants on the border in February 2025. In February 2024, under Biden, the number was 140,641. So
that's quite a stark difference.
A lot of these claims that get. I've just pressed. Sorry. Under Trump as well, with aid, that £350 billion in aid to Ukraine. However, Europe as a whole has only spent $100 billion. Again, this cannot be verified. So a lot of the things that are being said by Trump are yet to be verified.
I think what it is from a sort of PR point of view, it's a very clever way of getting information out there. They're going big on the figures that they know are correct, but they're being quite sketchy on figures that they can't quite prove. And in relation to this Ukraine figure, we're seeing what I'm going to call Boris Bus syndrome again, where they know the number they're publicising is fraudulent, or at the very least misleading, but they're pushing with it anyway because they know it'll get the topic into public conversation.
And I think you like you said, the difference in the amount of crossings from Mexico to the US, it shows that they are doing what they say they would do, and how they are being very radical in the way they govern. And I think this is just another thing for foreign policy as well. It is just further emphasis that the US is not the same country that it was just 2 months ago. Completely different policies now.
Well, 7:20, and you're listening to the Shock Radio News Show. We're now going to discuss welfare cuts. The Chancellor has announced plans to save several £billion in spending, including making cuts to welfare budgets. This is expected to come in the spring statement later this month. The financial forecast on the 26th of March, along with the spring statement. Gentlemen, what do you have to add on this topic?
So, at the moment, Starmer is using his foreign policy as a way to try and get himself up in the polls. But domestically, this government has really struggled. They've gone with the £22 billion black hole kind of phrase left from the Tories since they came into office, but we've already seen things like the bus fare increased, we've seen the winter fuel payments scrapped, and we're seeing taxes on farmers. So further welfare cuts, I just think this is going to be further aim being targeted at the government for poor economic performance, and the fact that we're lacking a bit of economic growth as well.
Alfie, what do you have to add on this area?
This is the fourth or fifth sort of fiscal event we've seen in the last year. Some of them have made a really big change to the way we're viewing policy. This one, whilst it is making cuts to that welfare budget, I don't think it'll have the same reach as the budget or even the fiscal statement of April last year. I think whilst there's a lot of hype about it at the minute, it'll fizzle out quite quickly once it is implemented, because it's not one of those things that can be measured in interest rates or anything like that. It's something a little bit further beneath the surface.
And I'll just add one last thing. The pressure is going to be on the government now, because we've committed to this increase in defence spending, but we're not committing spending to issues at home. And this is a government who said they were for the working people. So I just think that there might be a bit of backlash across the nation about this.
Well, yeah, thank you, Benny. And yeah, we're not going to know whether there's going to be spending cuts or what's going to happen if there's going to be extra taxes. But Sky's deputy political editor, Sam Coates, says Rachel Reeves has come under immense pressure to cut costs and has left herself no room before breaching her own rules.
Welfare cuts will be part of the package on the 26th of March. There was, I think, some pressure on Liz Kendall, and there was certainly some public briefing against her for not going further and fast enough. Anyway, she's changed position. There are going to be schooled welfare cuts that are going to help Rachel hit her borrowing targets.
Well, John Sweeney, Scotland's First Minister, said he is troubled by reports there could be a benefits cut. Benefits, in the last year, the government spent £65 billion on sickness benefits, a 25% increase from the year before the COVID pandemic. That figure is forecast to increase around £100 billion before the next general election. So there's a lot of balancing to do, and they've, from the legacy from the Tory party, they've got a lot to sort out.
Well, they want economic growth, and that's why they've got to go for work. And that's why they might think about cutting the benefits budget, because if you don't have people in work, you don't get economic growth.
And I think their vision is that by cutting the amount of money they're spending on welfare, they're freeing up a little bit in the public purse, but they're also potentially incentivising people to get back into the workplace who've otherwise been unable to, or have been on the verge of being able to, and have opted for benefits. How big this number is, I'm not sure, but they've done the calculations, and they've obviously worked out that it's a percentage that they can get back into the workplace.
Well, we're going to look at a story now, which is a Salford-based story. Stuart Everett, 67, also known as Roman Ziemaki, was killed and then dismembered. About a third of his body has been recovered from locations across Salford and North Manchester, and his body was sawn into 27 pieces. Marcin Makiewicz, 42, denies murdering Mr. Everett. The pair lived together in a house on Worsley Road, Winton, Eccles, with a third man named Michael Poloshki. Hannah Whiting has reported on this for Salford Now and has been following the trial. She's sent us this report.
Yesterday, on Tuesday the 4th of March 2025, Manchester Crown Court heard that a pensioner was sawn into 27 pieces with a hacksaw, and his body parts were strewn across the city of Salford. Marcin Majerkovic, 42, is accused of murdering Stuart Everett, 67, whose lower torso and thighs were found by a member of the public, wrapped in cling film and hidden in an abandoned bunker in Kersaldale Nature Reserve in Salford on April 4th last year. Majerkovic denies murder and manslaughter. The court heard both men lived in a house in Winton, Salford, with Everett subletting rooms in the property, including to Mr. Majerkovic. An increase in rent may have led to tension between the two men, the court heard. Upon the discovery of the torso on April 4th, police sought CCTV footage, which discovered that 2 days before, at around 5 p.m, a man was seen entering the pathway nearby, carrying a heavy blue bag, walking to the wooded area where the body part was found. Majerkovic was traced and arrested on suspicion of murder as he matched the man in the CCTV footage. Analysis of the Majerkovic's phone movements and CCTV footage showed him making a number of journeys with bags before returning, the court heard. At one location, Chesterfield Close in Winton, 9 packages of body parts were recovered, including many internal organs and Mr. Everett's genitalia. Recoveries at Linnyshaw Colliery Wood included body parts wrapped in cling film containing bones and muscle tissue. At Blackleach Reservoir, a further 6 body parts were found, including parts of the skull, scalp, and left ear, and parts of the skin from Mr. Everett's face. Jurors were told only 1/3 of Mr. Everett's body was recovered. Analysis showed dismemberment of the body was consistent with the use of a hacksaw and took place after death. The trial continues.
And we've also heard that they allege on March the 29th last year that Mr. Maverkovich made journeys to Boggart Hole Clough in Blackley, Chesterfield Close in Eccles, and Linney Shaw Colliery Woods in Walkden, locations where body parts were later discovered. Later that evening, he travelled to the Trafford Centre and spent £200 at Superdry, £183 at Skechers, and £3 at McDonald's, the court heard. The jurors were told that a day earlier, on March 28th, Mr. Maverkovich spent £21.09 on cleaning products, including microfiber cloths, sponge cloths, spray and wipes, after travelling into Walkden Town Centre. 28 minutes past 7. This has been the Shock Radio News Show with myself, Oliver Sykes, presenting, and with my guests Benny and Alfie. It's been produced by Luke Jones and directed by Thomas Sharp. Thank you very much for listening. We're going to now have a recap with today's main headlines. This has been the Shock Radio News Show with me, Oliver Sykes. The top stories at 7:30. A child's been killed after a car was driven onto a sports pitch in Cumbria. A second's been injured at Kendal Rugby Club. A man's been arrested. Police fear an engineering student who's been convicted of drugging and raping 10 women in London and China could have attacked 50 more. A court heard how 28-year-old Zhen Hao Zhou filmed 9 of the attacks as souvenirs. The White House says it's reconsidering the pause in funding for Ukraine. Donald Trump suspended military aid earlier this week following his bust-up with President Zelensky. The Pope spent the day in an armchair, alternating rest with work. The Vatican says the 88-year-old pontiff remains in stable condition and hasn't had a repeat of his recent breathing crisis. In football, Liverpool look to continue their impressive form when they return to Champions League action tonight. It's an 8 o'clock kickoff. They're away at Paris Saint-Germain in the first leg of their last 16 tie. And we're now going to have a look at the weather.
Shock Radio weather.
Weather tonight. Well, it's going to be settled with widely clear skies, but it's going to be milder. Minimum temperature in Manchester, 5 degrees Celsius. Thank you very much for listening to the Shock Radio News Show.